The screen glowed with a faint hum as Carter leaned closer, eyes scanning the string of names assigned for digital deletion. It was supposed to be routine. 10 files a day. No questions asked. No explanations given. The job paid well, too well for someone with his past. The records vanished with a keystroke, each one a ghost disappearing without a sound. But then, one name refused to vanish. The cursor blinked beside it. Carter's breath stalled. It was his own. Carter Reed, bold, unblinking, and red. Not grayed out like the others. A system flag. His hands trembled. The screen showed charges. Felony assault, age 17, sealed by court order. He remembered nothing. Or maybe he remembered everything and buried it. The office around him was silent. Too silent. He looked over his shoulder. Empty cubicles. No footsteps. No air conditioning hum. Just that single blinking cursor. Find him all. Find me. Why was he here? Who gave him this job? His fingers hovered over the delete key. He felt cold. Not fear. Something deeper. Recognition. A memory clawed at him from beneath his skin. A hallway. A scream. Blood under his nails. But no one had ever told him he had a record. No one had ever said he was part of what he was now paid to erase. The building was supposed to lock down at 9 p.m. sharp. Carter looked at the office door. It was wide open. Beyond it, darkness swallowed the hallway like a void. He stood, chair scraping against the tiles, and took a tentative step toward the entrance. Every sound felt magnified. The shift of his shoes, the distant hum of power. He glanced back at the monitor. His name was still there. Still waiting. Outside the office, the hallway stretched long and quiet. A flickering light down the hall blinked in irregular patterns. Carter's instincts told him to leave. Now. No. But something stronger rooted him to the floor. The urge to know. The urge to remember. It wasn't just fear. It was recognition. Something in that hallway was waiting for him. Maybe it always had been. He stepped into the hallway. The door didn't close behind him. It remained wide open, a silent witness. His footsteps echoed along the vinyl floor, the sound sterile and unnatural. A security camera above him turned with a mechanical whir. He paused. He wasn't sure if it had been facing that way before, or if it had always been watching. Carter looked up at the camera lens, his own reflection faint in its convex glass. He raised a hand. No response. Just the sound of distant ventilation kicking in and dying out. He took another step. A soft creak. Then nothing. No alarms. No voices. Only silence stretching too long to be normal. There was a door at the end of the hallway he didn't remember seeing before. It was slightly ajar. A sliver of warm amber light leaked through the crack. Unlike the rest of the building's cold sterility, this light felt lived in, familiar. Wall. Carter reached out slowly and pushed the door open with 2 fingers. It swung open noiselessly. Inside, a room filled with old filing cabinets, rusted slightly at the hinges, lined the walls. No windows. Just that amber light from a single hanging lamp swaying slightly. The room smelled of paper and something metallic. Something old. Carter didn't step inside. He just stood there, listening. There was a sound, barely audible. A whisper. Not words. Just breath. Carter finally stepped in. The air shifted. Not in temperature, but in weight. As if he had entered a place time had forgotten. He moved toward the closest cabinet. It had no label. He opened it slowly. The drawer creaked, heavy with files. He pulled one. No name, just a number. He flipped it open. A photo paper clipped inside. A younger version of himself. 15. Blood on his shirt. Eyes vacant. Carter stumbled backward. Papers fell to the floor, splaying out like feathers. He hadn't just been erased. He had been filed, hidden, shall, categorized. Like all the others. The whisper behind him grew louder. And this time, it spoke. Carter didn't sleep. He sat in his dim apartment, the blinds drawn tight against the gray morning light. The file lay open on his coffee table, pages flattened by trembling hands. The photo of his younger self stared up at him, distant and bruised. He tried to recall that boy. 15, thin, wide-eyed. But the memories refused to form. Just flashes, a scream, a cold floor, an empty house. The system said he had sealed juvenile charges, but no one had ever told him. Not his foster parents. Not his caseworker. Not the man who'd hired him. He should feel anger, but it was something worse. Emptiness. As if some part of him had been removed without his knowledge. He looked around the apartment. No pictures, no mementos, no evidence he'd ever really lived here. It wasn't sadness in his chest. It was vacancy. The life he had built now felt like someone else's costume. He whispered, "Why would they hide this from me?" But the silence offered nothing in return. He visited the foster home where he'd spent his teenage years. The building had changed, but the address was the same. A woman answered the door. Older, unfamiliar. She said the previous owners moved out years ago. Carter stood on the porch, stunned. He remembered birthdays here, punishments, a dog that used to bark when he came home late. But now, all of it felt unreal. He walked to the backyard. The old tire swing was gone. Just grass and a cracked fence. He stared at the spot where he swore he once buried a toy car. He dropped to his knees, fingers digging into the dirt, scraping at the memory. But the earth held no answers. He sat back, palms dirty, breath shallow. If the place he remembered no longer existed, did the memories even belong to him? Or were they planted, fragments meant to keep him docile? Reality wavered around the edges. Truth had become untrustworthy. He searched through public archives that afternoon, buried deep in a government records office, chasing anything with his name. A clerk guided him to a terminal, expression blank. Carter typed slowly, watching the interface churn. No results. Again. Again. A dozen misspellings. Still, nothing. He tried aliases, school records, even a police blotter. Still, blank. It was like his teenage years had been erased. No school photos. No attendance. No social worker notes. Nothing. Nothing. The clerk gave him a curious glance but said nothing. Carter's fingers hovered over the keys. He was here, alive, breathing, but on paper he didn't exist until age 18. It was as if his identity had been assembled suddenly, dropped into the world already broken. He whispered, "Who built me?" And somewhere in the archives, the light above him flickered once. He went back to the office after hours. He needed answers. The hallways were darker now, the fluorescence colder. He walked past the empty desks, past the coffee machine humming like a distant warning. While his access card still worked. The server room sat silent, blinking with coded rhythms. He plugged in a portable drive. The terminal fought back, encrypted. Deep access required biometric clearance. Carter stared at the screen. Then he saw it. Employee entry log. Read, see date of hire, not 6 months ago but 11 years. His breath caught. He had never been here that long. He remembered the interview. The recruiter. The onboarding packet. But none of it added up. He clicked the log file. Access denied. Another warning. Restricted to level A personnel only. That wasn't him. Or was it? He exited the building slowly. The night air sharp against his skin. He crossed the street and stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching the glass building loom like a tombstone. Inside it, a life that might never have been his. A lie maintained through silence and perfect paperwork. Carter looked at his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. Someone had edited him. Not just his file, but his memory, his story, his truth. And now he was awake. He turned and walked into the night, not knowing where he was going. Only that whatever was at the end of this unraveling thread, he couldn't stop pulling. He didn't want redemption. He wanted the truth, even if it ruined him. Carter sat in a dim diner at the edge of town, the kind of place that felt stuck in the past. His phone lay face down on the table, untouched. Across from him, an older man stirred his coffee slowly. Gray hair, wireframe glasses, the faint scent of tobacco clinging to his jacket. This was Doyle, former caseworker, now retired and reluctant. "You shouldn't be looking into this," Doyle said quietly. "You were sealed for a reason." Carter's voice was low. "I didn't agree to that seal." Doyle didn't blink. That was the point. Carter clenched his jaw, trying to keep his composure. Doyle spoke again. "You were the test subject, the first successful erasure. That file, that wasn't your crime. It was your permission slip." Carter stared at him, stunned. "What do you mean, not my crime?" Doyle leaned closer. "Someone else did it. You just fit better. You were made to fit." Carter's stomach turned. Carter left the diner in silence. The street outside was slick with rain. Neon signs buzzed like faint warnings overhead. He lit a cigarette with trembling hands, though he hadn't smoked in years. The taste grounded him. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. He felt nauseous. The night felt tighter now, like it was pressing in on him. "I was made to fit," he repeated to himself, voice cracked. How many others had they done this to? How many lives restructured? He glanced down an alley, shadows shifting like memories. Carter had thought he was damaged goods. Turns out, he was repackaged property. Whatever he was, it wasn't real. He exhaled smoke into the cold. "You don't fix what's broken," he whispered. "You replace it." At 3 a.m., Carter returned to his apartment and tore it apart. Drawers flung open, frames smashed, cushions ripped, looking for something, anything that could tell him what was real. He found nothing. No birth certificate. No school records. No photos before 18. He opened a metal box under the bed. Inside, an old ID card with a government logo he didn't recognize and a different last name, Carter Ames. He stared at it, the photo unmistakably him, but younger, colder. His mind reeled. That wasn't just a new name. It was a whole different identity. He didn't remember ever being Carter Ames. Was that who he was before the program? Or after? Desperation led him to a hacker he barely trusted. Woman named Rio, mid-30s, sharp, guarded. They met in an underground co-working space, hidden beneath an abandoned print shop. Rio flipped through his files, expression unreadable. "Your metadata is fractured," she said. "These aren't edits, they're fabrications." Carter leaned forward. "Can you trace the origin?" She tapped her keyboard. "It's not from any public system. It's a sandbox, completely insulated." She turned the monitor toward him. A single word glowed at the top of a black file tree. Eidolon die. "What is that?" he asked. Rio hesitated. "That's not a system. That's a ghost protocol. You're not erased. You're replicated." Carter felt the floor shift under him. Carter walked the streets afterward in silence. The city looked unfamiliar now. Too symmetrical. Too clean. He passed people talking, laughing, living, and none of it felt real. Were they like him? Constructs? Victims? Ghosts? He reached a park and sat on a cold bench. In his pocket, he still held the ID labeled Carter Ames. He turned it over. On the back was a barcode. No number. No issue date. Just a line of code beneath it. Iteration 7.2. He exhaled slowly. That wasn't a version number. That was a version of him. Someone had made him. Someone had deleted him. Someone had done this before. Who the hell am I? He whispered. And the wind moved through the trees as if trying to answer, but saying nothing. Carter returned to Rio with the barcode. She scanned it in silence, the room lit only by the glow of the screen. Her face lost color as data filled the screen. This isn't a database, she said. It's a deployment log. Carter stared. Deployment? She nodded. Eidolon isn't a record system. It's a replacement initiative. He stepped closer. Replacement for what? Rio whispered. People. Carter's id, Carter Ames, was part of a timeline of identical individuals, each with a subtle behavioral variance. His life hadn't just been manipulated. It had been simulated, tested, overwritten, versioned. They didn't erase you, Rio said. They're still running you. Carter couldn't move. The memory flashes. The gaps. The feeling of unfamiliarity in his own skin. It all made sense now. He wasn't the original. He wasn't even the only one. He was iteration 7.2 of something pretending to be a man. Carter demanded answers. Rio hesitated, then opened a locked drawer and handed him a dusty external drive. This has the backups, she said. Of what? He asked. Your iterations. All of them. Carter's hands trembled as he connected the drive. Files bloomed, videos, reports, neurological patterns. Version 3.1, Anxiety Disorder. 5. Violent Tendencies. 6.4. Complete Compliance. 7.2. Moderate Resistance, High Emotional Volatility. They were learning from you, Rio whispered. Every failure taught them how to build you better. Carter saw footage, himself in different rooms, under different lighting, different scars. Some of them ended in silence, others in screams. His entire life was a lab report. He wasn't hiding from a past. He was the past, looped and copied. Carter left Rio's lab in a daze, walking until the city swallowed him. He entered a metro station, barely conscious of the movement around him. Faces blurred, voices muffled. He saw a man at the far end of the platform who looked like him. Same build, same posture. But it wasn't a mirror. The man turned and locked eyes with Carter. No expression. No surprise. Just cold familiarity. The train roared between them. When it passed, the man was gone. Carter stood frozen. Had he seen another version? Had they been watching him too? He gripped the railing tight, knuckles white. He wasn't just being followed. He was being mirrored. Studied. Replaced in real time. He wasn't the anomaly. He was the test. He went back to the office, the place where it began. The guard at the front desk didn't recognize him. Said no one by that name was employed there. His ID was invalid. Carter forced a smile and walked away, but rage boiled inside him. Outside, he found the fire exit. It buzzed as he forced it open. Alarms didn't sound. No cameras turned. Inside, the office looked the same, but wrong. His desk was empty. No nameplate. No computer. As if he'd never been there. He ran to the archive room. The filing cabinets were gone. Replaced with sleek locked drawers. No evidence. No ghosts. He slammed his fist against the cold metal. Erase the past, he muttered. Erase the man. But someone had left a single folder on the ground, face down. He picked it up. The label read, 8 activated. The folder contained one photo. Not of Carter. Of someone new. Younger. Dell. Sharper eyes. Wearing a suit. Standing in front of the same building. It was version 8. Carter flipped the page. Evaluation notes. Improved control. No memory anomalies. Objective clarity intact. Underlined. Deployment scheduled. Original to be retired. Carter's breath caught. Retired. That wasn't metaphor. That was execution. He was no longer a person to them, just a failed version. and he had been scheduled for deletion the moment 8 woke up. Rage cracked something open inside him. He wasn't going to run. Not anymore. They had built him to be compliant. But they'd miscalculated one thing. He still remembered how to fight. Carter didn't sleep. He spent the night building a plan. Rio uploaded the last data dump onto a secure drive. "You sure about this?" she asked. He nodded, jaw clenched. "They're deploying 8 tomorrow. If I wait, I vanish." He knew where they'd do it. Sector 9, the off-grid site marked in the drive metadata. The place his iterations were built, tested, killed. He watched Rio burn the last local files. "If you go in, there's no coming back," she warned. Carter loaded the drive into his coat pocket. "There was never a back to come to," he said. As he stepped into the darkness, something in him settled. Not peace, but clarity. They had shaped him to be erased. But they hadn't erased enough. They left something raw. Angry. Alive. Bitwang. Carter Reed wasn't going to be decommissioned. Not quietly. Sector 9 wasn't on any map. Hidden beyond the outer city, it sat behind electrified fencing and motion sensors. Carter crouched on a hill above it, watching the facility pulse with sterile light. Armed security patrolled the perimeter, standard, cold, efficient. He inhaled and descended through the underbrush, sticking to shadows. Rio's codes opened the south panel gate. Inside, the air reeked of chemical sterilizers. The floor was too clean, too perfect. He moved past observation windows, empty labs, dissected chairs, walls that didn't echo. He reached the mainframe room, door sealed tight. A security panel blinked red. Carter held up the stolen ID. The light turned green. The door slid open, and inside stood someone waiting. Someone identical, but newer, sharper, and 8. 8 turned slowly, expression calm. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Carter stepped forward. "Neither should you." The room was silent, walls padded, cameras blinking. 8 tilted his head. "You were a useful blueprint, but inefficient." Carter's fists clenched. "I was human." 8 stepped closer. "No, you were emotional. Erratic. That's what they removed." Carter raised the drive. "This has every file, every failure, every truth they buried." 8's eyes flicked to the screen. "That data isn't authorized." Carter smirked. "Good." He jammed the drive into the terminal. Lights flickered. Alarms triggered. "You'll destroy the facility," 8 said. Carter whispered, "That's the point." Then he lunged. The fight was brutal. Not just physical, instinctive. Like muscle memory, against muscle memory. Carter landed a punch, but 8 didn't flinch. "Pain is inefficient," he said, sweeping Carter to the ground. Carter rose, bleeding. "That's why I'll win." They crashed into the terminal, sparks flying. Wires tore loose. Alarms screamed. 8 tried to reach the drive, but Carter yanked him back and threw him against the server rack. "You don't get to erase me," he shouted. 8 charged again. Carter locked his arm and whispered, "You're just a cleaner copy." He drove him backward into the fuse box. Electricity surged. 8 dropped, twitching. Smoke filled the room. But Carter didn't run. He uploaded the file to the core. Then he turned and walked into fire. He made it out the back before the explosion reached the surface. The ground shook. Flames burst through the vents behind him. Sector 9 collapsed inward, burying the truth in rubble. Carter limped into the woods, coughing, coat torn and face scorched. But he was alive. And the drive was gone, burned with the rest. No more evidence. But that wasn't the point. It had never been about proving it. It was about ending it. Carter sat on a rock, breathing hard, blood mixing with sweat. Somewhere in the city, 8's replacements were probably waiting. But they'd never be perfect. Not anymore. Because now someone knew. Someone had broken through. Carter whispered to the trees, "I'm not your failure anymore." The woods remained silent. But this time, they felt like they were listening. Carter drifted for days. No phone. No map. Light. Just endless roads and backwoods towns that didn't ask questions. He watched people from afar, cashiers, janitors, families in diners. He studied how they smiled, how they argued, how they existed without question. For the first time in his fragmented life, he wasn't trying to erase himself or outrun something artificial. He was trying to understand what it meant to be real. At night he replayed everything, Sector 9, the drive. Eight's voice saying, "You were emotional." He repeated it in his head like a mantra. That word used to feel like weakness. Now it felt like a weapon. His emotions weren't flaws. They were scars. Markers of experience. Of self. He wasn't sure who had built him. But whoever they were, they hadn't finished the job. Carter Reed had survived. Not as a perfect system, but as something worse. Something unpredictable. Something free. He eventually found his way to a library, small, quiet, forgotten. A clerk offered no questions as he took a terminal seat. He searched his own name again, Carter Reed. Then Carter Ames. Then nothing. Still no record. His file was gone. Fully. No trace of any iteration. They hadn't just lost him, they'd purged him. He sat back in the chair, letting the quiet hum of the computers settle in his chest. Most people feared being forgotten. Carter felt strangely comforted by it. There was no one left hunting him. Because officially he didn't exist. And that meant something dangerous. He could finally decide what came next. Not what version. Not what designation. What name. Outside the library, Carter sat on the steps, watching the clouds drift by. He pulled a notebook from his coat, the one Rio had given him, a blank journal. Inside the front cover she had scribbled a single line, "Write your version." He opened to the first page. Pen hovered. No alias. No fabricated ID. Just the raw truth. Whatever he remembered. Not everything came back. Some things probably never would. But that was fine. The point wasn't to remember who built him. It was to decide who he was now. Carter wrote one sentence. Then another. Then another. His hands shook, not with fear, but with the weight of being unedited for the first time. He wasn't clean. He wasn't stable. But he was honest. And the page didn't blink back at him. It listened. Later that evening, he walked through a cemetery on the town's edge. Not seeking anything. Just following instinct. The wind whispered through the headstones. Some names were faded, some fresh. He stopped at an unmarked grave. Just a stone with no inscription. Carter crouched. "Whoever you were," he whispered, "you mattered." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was for himself. Maybe it was for version 1. Or the boy in the photo. Or the version that never got to scream. The grave didn't answer. But it didn't need to. Carter stood, placed a small stone on the marker, and walked on. As the sun disappeared, Carter found a hill above the town, just tall enough to see the lights flicker below. He sat in silence, breath visible in the cooling air. For the first time he didn't feel like a file. Or a subject. Or a risk to be contained. He felt unmeasured. No outcome to predict. No test to pass. They had designed him to function, but never to feel. And yet here he was, feeling everything. The grief. The fury. The strange, impossible hope. He didn't know where to go next. But for now, that was enough. He existed outside the system. Not erased. Not controlled. Just a man beneath the sky. Carter whispered into the wind, "This is who I am." And this time, no one corrected him. Carter crossed state lines by foot, his hoodie fraying at the cuffs, the road behind him long erased by dust and memory. In a rural town, he found a mechanic shop hiring under the table. No ID required. Just hands that could work, and a voice that didn't ask questions. He took it. Days turned into weeks. He cleaned engines, swept floors, changed oil for old trucks no one else cared about. It wasn't much, but it was real. He slept in the back room, alone, but not hunted. The silence felt earned. He never gave his full name. The other workers called him Red because of the rust stains always on his hands. He never corrected them. He'd lost a name, maybe more than one, but he'd found something else. The rhythm of life without surveillance. No protocols. No iterations. Just sweat, dirt, and breathing. And that was enough, for now. One evening, Carter stood at the back of the shop, watching the sun dip behind the hills. A child passed by with a toy plane, running barefoot in the gravel, laughter echoing. Carter smiled. Small, involuntary. That sound, it cut through the noise in his head like light through fog. He remembered flashes of childhood that might have been real, might have been programmed. But it didn't matter. That laugh was real, and it grounded him more than any record ever could. For a second, he thought about speaking to the kid. But he stayed still. Just listened. Not every story needed to be rewritten. Some could just be witnessed. Silently. Carter let the moment pass like a wave. And for once, he didn't feel the need to chase it. In the dark hours before dawn, Carter sat alone beside a rusted toolbox, notebook in his lap, fingers ink-stained. He flipped back through pages he'd written, some coherent, others just scribbled bursts of memory. At the center was one sentence, underlined, circled, written over and over again. They didn't finish me. He ran his thumb across it slowly. He didn't know if he was built, born, copied, or corrupted. But he had outlived all of them. 8, the creators, the system that tried to delete him. He didn't feel victorious. Just awake. And that awareness carried weight. The kind that can't be shaken. The kind that reminds you what it costs to live truthfully. He whispered, "This is what survival looks like." And he believed it. A month later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, a single photo. It showed Carter, asleep on the garage floor, months earlier. Back when he still worked at the government facility. Before he knew the truth. Someone had taken it. Someone had kept watching. On the back a message was scrawled in red ink, "You're not the last." He stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. The system may have fallen, but the idea, Eidolon, still pulsed in dark corners. Someone else would wake up next. Confused. Hollow. Angry. Just like he had. Carter folded the photo and placed it in the notebook. Not as a warning, but as a promise. Carter stood by the road at sunrise, backpack slung over one shoulder, the garage behind him in silence. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move. Somewhere, someone was waking up in their own lie. And he couldn't save them, but he could be proof. Proof that you could walk out of the fire. That you didn't have to become what they made you. That survival was messy, lonely, imperfect, but real. He stepped off the gravel and onto the road. No one called after him. No one watched. Just the wind and his shadow stretching long behind him. As he disappeared into the horizon, he whispered the truth the system had tried to erase. I was never a version. I was the mistake they couldn't control.